Gutierrez, the WBA's mandatory challenger in the lightweight division, is going to be back in action August 1st in Bilbao. And the fight itself is a tune-up kind of fight, keep busy kind of fight against a Chinese woman in Sylvia Szabaddos. Fighter with losses in the double digits, been in there with a lot of people. We know that Miriam was in the running to be Katie Taylor's next opponent as soon as things started falling apart with Amanda Serrano. There were those out there that thought that Miriam was going to be the natural choice for Katie, that she'd never in a million years give Delphine Persoon a rematch, and shows what they knew, right?
Right.
Katie Taylor and Delphine Persoon are, in fact, having a rematch. But regardless of what happens with their fight, whether Katie wins again or Delphine avenges the loss, what have you, Miriam Gutierrez is the mandatory challenger to the WBA title, and whoever ends up with it is going to have to deal with her,
one way or another.
Miriam sports a professional record of 13 wins, 5 knockouts, no losses, hailing from out of Madrid, Spain. Miriam's quality of competition has been largely pedestrian, journeywoman, no-hopers. She has yet to really test herself against someone solid in the lightweight division, and I think that would make a lot of sense ahead of a world title shot, a world title opportunity. But because of Miriam's age, Miriam, she's pushing 40. I figure that she's going to want that title shot sooner rather than later.
Time really isn't on her side.
Hypothetically speaking, if Katie Taylor wins the rematch, makes her way past Delphine Persoon for the second time, can we expect Miriam to hit the gas and push for that title shot? And will that get in the way of Katie Taylor's plans to move up in weight, fight Cecilia Breakhouse? Assuming Cecilia makes it past Jessica McCaskill. This is boxing, folks. Anything can happen. Whilst we know what the plan is, to fight Delphine Persoon and subsequently move on from that to fight Cecilia Breakhouse, Jessica McCaskill might stifle those plans. The question is, where does Miriam Gutierrez fit into that picture? Well, Miriam Gutierrez, push for that title shot and force Katie Taylor to change her plans or vacate her WBA title in order to maintain them. That is the question. One way or another, we're going to find out. But for now, keep your eyes peeled for the return of Miriam Gutierrez, the fight of next month. In other news, per a tweet from Mike Copinger, Ryan Garcia received an offer this week to fight Luke Campbell later this year in the United States. Sources tell The Athletic negotiations are ongoing between Golden Boy and Matchroom. And, stuff like this is a part of the reason I feel that sometimes Ryan Garcia is being a prima donna, that he's getting a little bit ahead of himself, that he's getting a bit of a big head. Because essentially what this news indicates is that it's Luke Campbell's side of things making the offers. And generally speaking, when you're a big name, when you're a marquee fighter, you're not receiving offers, you're the guy making them. But, Ryan Garcia, at least according to this news, he's not the guy in the driver's seat. I mean, every other fight, we're hearing about some issue with Ryan Garcia's purses, what he feels he should be paid, given his popularity, his celebrity, via social media. This is becoming a more prevalent topic, fight by fight.
Kid's always complaining.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. I've never seen a prospect or a contender complain quite as much about their prices as Ryan Garcia. And Ryan has yet to amass any solid victories, any signature wins
over solid fighters.
Tenuous at best to say that Ryan has crossed over from prospect to contender status, though at minimum we can say Ryan's not a world champion. He's not a full-fledged world titleist, yet we're always hearing this guy complaining about what his prices are and what he thinks he should be paid, based on a social media following.
And the kid is popular.
He does have a following. He does have a solid foundation, a good buzz going. But how good is it when, in this set of negotiations, you're not even the guy making the offers. Luke Campbell's people are the ones making the offers. So pardon me for saying so, Mr. Big in the Britches, but maybe those eggs need a little bit more bacon. That, you're popular. You got a social media following, and that's nice.
That's good.
But you can't be that big a name when you're not in the driver's seat. This set of negotiations, for what it's worth, I happen to think it's a good thing. I happen to think that the offers being sent from Matchroom, as opposed to the offers being sent by Golden Boy,
that's encouraging.
That's actually a good thing, as Matchroom has the necessary finances for Ryan Garcia to get that kid in the ring. Money's always an issue for this guy, but it just so happens that Matchroom's not afraid to spend a little to get a little.
They'll pay you what you want.
And in that way, this is encouraging. This is good news, as I trust that Eddie Heine and the people over there at Matchroom are going to do what they got to do to make sure that the fight happens. But when I read this, that it's Matchroom sending out the offers, essentially it's Matchroom in the driver's seat, I can't help but think that, you know what? For all the crying and complaining that this kid does about his prices and how he's always asserting his celebrity, always talking about his following and his marquee value, if it really were that big a deal, you'd be the one sending offers to Luke Campbell. But as it stands, his people are the ones sending offers to you. So maybe you should pump the brakes a little bit. Maybe you're getting a little bit overzealous and you're getting a big head. You need to slow down. As far as the fight, I think it's a great fight. I think it's just what the doctor ordered. There is a genuine air of intrigue in Ryan Garcia versus Luke Campbell because, as it stands, we've never seen Ryan Garcia in there with someone like Luke Campbell. A statuesque southpaw, very big for the lightweight division. Can box from the outside and go to the body on the inside. Good set of legs.
Good footing.
Good sized punch. He's not the biggest puncher, but he ain't pillow-fisted either. A guy who's had some ups and had some downs, which makes him experienced. A guy who knows how to dig deep, knows how to survive in the trenches. The kind of guy that Ryan Garcia hasn't dealt with so far. You know, I think Ryan shows a lot of promise. I think Ryan Garcia perhaps has a high ceiling, but what I think...
And what you think.
That ain't going to put names on Ryan's resume. That's not going to add scalps to his mantle. Ultimately, it's up to Ryan Garcia to show and prove. Predictions and anecdotes are no substitute for concrete evidence. If Ryan Garcia is every inch the fighter that he says he is, and he's every inch the fighter that we think he is, then he will make it through this litmus test. But in order for him to make it through it, he's got to actually have it. The good news is, I think he will. I am confident in Matchroom's ability to make this fight happen. Even with someone who's as big a prima donna as Ryan Garcia has been the last few fights.
Even him.
Even with a guy who drives a hard bargain the way that Ryan drives a hard bargain, I'm confident that Matchroom has the kind of finance and willingness to make the fight that we will end up seeing it later on in 2020. In other news, per a tweet from Michael Benson, Anthony Joshua had this to say. He says, "I wonder what people see in Tyson Fury that's so intimidating that he can't be touched. I think he hasn't been in the deep end enough. You don't just go there once or twice. Continuously prove versus championship fighters. That's how you gain my respect." And to some, these statements might read as a bit peculiar.
A little.
A bit hollow even. But Tyson Fury hasn't been on the deep end enough times, having fought Vladimir Klitschko, having fought Deontay Wilder, having been dropped by Deontay Wilder 2 times, and subsequently coming back in the rematch.
And stopping him.
How could anyone say that Tyson Fury hasn't been on the deep end enough? Well, I think consistency has a lot to do with it, and I think that that's what Anthony Joshua is talking about here, that after what was Tyson Fury's biggest win, his crowning achievement,
Beating the odds.
when he defeated and unseated the then unified champion, many years, Vladimir Klitschko. After he did this, Tyson Fury absconded. He didn't defend any of the titles that he won.
He vacated them.
All of them. And whether it was due to being mentally unfit, like the reports at the time were stating, or it was due to something else entirely, perhaps pressure as a result of the Christian Hammer ped fiasco, scrutiny from UCAD. I mean, maybe it was either one, maybe it was both.
Could have been.
But either way, Tyson Fury got to take a hiatus from boxing that Anthony Joshua did not take. I think that's what Anthony Joshua is talking about. He is characterizing that while Tyson Fury has fought in some high-level fights and achieved some high-level victories, there was very little consistency in him doing so. And that Tyson Fury's most noteworthy victories look a lot like hit and runs. Whether or not you agree with that is entirely up to you. I am merely trying to characterize what it is Anthony Joshua is getting at. I think that's what he's talking about, that while he and Tyson Fury have both collected some very noteworthy scalps, Anthony Joshua has exhibited more consistency when he did it than Tyson did. It is true that Anthony Joshua has faced more division-by-division top 10 fighters than Tyson Fury has. That's not a debate. That's a numbers game, and if we go by the numbers, if we do a head count, yes, Anthony Joshua has consistently, with an emphasis on consistency, faced more division by division top 10 fighters, the best 10 fighters in a given weight class at that time.
Right.
Anthony Joshua has, in fact, faced more of these kinds of fighters than Tyson Fury has, having debuted 5 years after Tyson Fury as a professional boxer. That's right. Tyson Fury debuted back in 2008, whereas Anthony Joshua didn't come around till 2013. As it stands, it is a matter of fact, not a matter of opinion, that Anthony Joshua has fought more division by division top 10 fighters as a professional boxer than Tyson Fury. And this might be the consistency that Anthony Joshua is talking about. Whether you're talking about Charles Martin, the then undefeated IBF champion, to Dominic Breazeale, who at that time, believe it or not, was ranked as a divisional top 10 fighter. Carlos Takam, WBO champion Joseph Parker, WBA mandatory challenger Alexander Povetkin. Every single one of them was ranked as a top 10 fighter at the time that Anthony Joshua fought them. Look, these are two very accomplished guys. Two-time heavyweight champions, but it is simply a matter of fact that while Anthony Joshua has defended his crown 6 times, Tyson Fury hasn't done that once. This rubber match with Deontay Wilder is going to be the very first time that Tyson Fury defended a title he was in possession of.
WBC time.
He's been around 5 years longer than Anthony Joshua. So if consistency is the subject, if that's what we're discussing, one of these fighters really has exhibited more consistency at the highest levels of the sport than the other. And there is something to be said about that. There is something to be addressed there. That when you're consistently competing at this level, no breaks,
No hiatuses.
for any reason, when you win the titles, procure them, and subsequently defend them, well, that's a lot more difficult to do than picking and choosing when you want to gamble. When is the best time to do it? When is the appropriate time for you to take a chance? I'm not telling you that Tyson Fury hasn't had some stellar victories. He obviously has.
We know.
But I wouldn't say that he's been as consistent as Anthony Joshua, and that just so happens to be the subject. Who's been more consistent? So you can spare me your fight predictions, you can spare me your anecdotes, your observations about who you think is the better boxer, when that's not the subject. The subject is who has competed at this level more consistently throughout the years. And you're not going to skirt around concrete facts. Facts by the numbers, with anecdotes, observations, and opinions. There is truth to what Anthony Joshua is implying. There is truth to what he is saying. And while what he is saying doesn't forecast how a fight between him and Tyson Fury is going to go, it's still worth mulling over. It's still worth making the observation that one of these guys is a lot more consistent than the other in and outside of the ring. Because look, Fury's a great boxer, not taking that away from him. But in and outside of the ring, there's nothing consistent about this guy. This guy contradicts himself and goes back and forth with himself like nobody's fucking business. So let's just say that perhaps consistency isn't Tyson Fury's strong suit. Anthony Joshua wonders what people see in Tyson Fury that's so intimidating that he can't be touched. And it sounds a lot to me like Anthony Joshua doesn't like how people are writing him off. They don't give him any odds to beat Tyson Fury. And, you know, boxing fans, they blow hot and cold. They're a fickle bunch. After the first Wilder fight, people couldn't say enough about how Tyson Fury's such a great fucking boxer.
Right.
And comes the Otto Berlin fight, and suddenly they doubt Tyson Fury's abilities. They're worried about the cut that was opened over his eye. I mean, it goes back to the old saying that you're only as good as your last fight. Comes to Anthony Joshua's last fight, there are a lot of people out there who are of the opinion that he fought a safety-first kind of fight.
That's their last memory of him.
As that was the last time anyone saw him in action. Whereas the last time anyone saw Tyson Fury in action, he was
knocking out Wilder,
beating Deontay Wilder to a bloody pulp. The thing is, though, for anyone looking at that fight as some kind of an insight into what an Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury fight would look like, well, those are two different fights and those are two different fighters. In Anthony Joshua, you're not dealing with a guy who's limited to trying to land the big right hand. Anthony Joshua's got more in his arsenal and is an entirely different fighter to Deontay Wilder. You can't really use one fight as an insight for another unless there are common denominators and similar characteristics between the fighters, and that's just it. Anthony Joshua's method of operation is entirely different to Wilder's. Consider that Otto Wallin actually put up a better fight than Deontay Wilder did in his rematch with Tyson Fury. That's right. Where Otto Wallin, a guy who was quite unheralded at the time, had done nothing of note, he managed to draw blood on Tyson Fury and make Tyson Fury work for it. Otto lost the fight, but I think most people would agree that Otto Wallin put up a better fight than Deontay Wilder did in their rematch.
The Tyson Fury rematch.
That goes back to the old saying, styles make fights. And it is the styles of the fighters that determines how the fight looks. So, Deontay Wilder's style is not in any way similar to Anthony Joshua's. But if there are people out there running around thinking that Tyson Fury has this air of invincibility, it's because of how he looked against Deontay Wilder. That answers what Anthony Joshua's wondering about. That effectively answers the question, why is it that people think that Tyson Fury's so intimidating?
It's because of how he looked in the Wilder fight.
The casual observer sees this, sees Tyson Fury manhandling Deontay Wilder, and tells themselves that this was Anthony Joshua's great white whale. This was his super fight, and Tyson Fury, he made short work of that guy. So Anthony Joshua, he doesn't stand a fucking chance. That is what the casual observer tells themselves. But anyone who understands the sport, anyone in the know, knows that what you do to Wilder,
Whatever it was.
what worked with Wilder, might not work with Anthony Joshua, because styles make fights.